bunch of folks trickling in the room and joining us here on Zoom. We're also streaming live on Facebook. So it just feels absolutely delicious to be back in community with you all for our very first community conversation of 2024. I don't want to take up too much time because we have some incredible folks that are going to really lean into community and share some of their amazingness with us today. But a couple of things just to help us settle into the space. So one, if you are here on Zoom or if you're over there on Facebook watching us, we would love for you to get in that chat and make that house your home. Let us know where you're joining from. Say hey as we're moving through our time together. If there's any quotes, anything that our panelists say that you really want to elevate, drop that in the chat. If you have any questions or anything as well, we'll have some time at the end for a bit of a Q&A, and we would love to bring your voices live there. But yes, get in the chat, get nice and cozy, make some friends. Let us know where you're joining us from. You'll see here pinned on the screen with me is our ASL interpreters. We'll have two interpreters that will be switching on and off throughout our time here together. So everyone, as you come into the room, you can sit back and relax. Everyone will be muted because we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to hear from our panelists. So again, get in the chat. Would love to bring your voices in that respect. All right. So with all of that being said, you see Tony Porter here on the screen with me as well. Tony's going to be facilitating and kind of our weaver of our conversation today. So I'll turn it over to Tony, who's going to introduce our panelists, and we'll get our community conversation started today. So good to be with you all.
All right, cool. Thank you, Danny. Hey, good morning, good afternoon. Good to be with you beautiful people again. And I appreciate everyone has their cameras on. We can see your beautiful faces and enjoy this community together. All right, thinking outside the man box, innovative ways to engage men. That's what we want to tap into today. And some of the things that we know, really like a quick overview or some information as we begin to lean into this. What do we know? We know that men and boys don't ask for help, don't offer help, don't accept help. It's a direct result of our collective socialization, what we call the man box. And the man box teaches men to always act like we have everything under control. Being vulnerable is viewed as a no-no. All right. And you know, this whole thing about being a role self versus our whole self, ROLE versus WHOLE, and this impact, right? Men being challenged to be our authentic selves and how that shows up in spaces. We also know research from Harvard and Rutgers shows that men who report having traditional views of masculinity are less likely to get consistent health care, mental health care, right? More than 6 million men suffer from depression each year, but male depression often goes undiagnosed. Men are more likely to say they are tired, stressed, or bored than admit to feelings of sadness and loneliness or issues of worth, right? Male suicide, this is important, folks, has been on the rise since 2000, and 3.5 times as many men die from suicide than women. Right? These are really important issues for us to truly begin to address. Those numbers continue to be on the rise when we look at men facing multiple forms of oppression. It's why at a call to men, we do engaging men's work through an intersectional lens, all right? So today we're going to be talking about innovative ways to engage men in promoting healthy, respectful manhood in an effort to prevent gender-based violence. For us at a call to men, we're really intentionally looking at how to use culture to impact culture. Years ago, man, in doing this work, we used to run away from culture. No, now we're embracing it, putting our arms around it, giving it a big old kiss, right? We have to use culture to impact culture, all right? Also, a couple more things I want to share with you. No, you know what? No, I'm not going to go there. Let's just do this here. Let's jump right into this. Let's get busy. What I want to do right now is introduce the folks who are going to be the major part of this conversation that we're going to have together. All right, we have Tanya Jones, Nicole Snell, Corey Fells, and Jewel Woods. I want to ask each of them to take about 30 seconds each to introduce themselves to you and what they're going to be bringing to this conversation. I'm going to go to you first, Jules. I see you close to me on the green here.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jewel Woods. I'm the founder and clinical director of Male Behavioral Health and the Center for Men and Boys.
All right, Tanya.
Good afternoon, everyone. Excited to be here. My name is Tanya Jones. I'm the CEO and founder of Interactive Advocacy, and I'm also the president of the North Carolina Veterans Business Association.
Excellent. My sister. Nicole?
Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Snell. I am the CEO of Girls Fight Back and the founder of Outdoor Defense. I am so passionate about the violence prevention work that I do, and I engage all types of communities, including women and people of all gender identities, to help people establish boundaries and to live their life without limits.
Thank you. I appreciate you, sister, as well. And let's hear from Corey.
Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here. I am a co-founder and also a president of a nonprofit where we called Black Space, where we give free group therapy to Black and brown people throughout the city of Milwaukee. I'm a nine-year military veteran, and once again, very happy to be here.
All right. We're going to get into this. Just keeping in mind that we believe here at A Call to Men that the more we promote healthy, respectful manhood, right, the more we increase it, the more we then decrease violence against women and girls. We see it as a win-win all the way around, right? The folks that you're meeting here today, that you're going to be hearing from today, they're doing this work in mental health spaces, military, arts, clinical settings, all right? And they're going to just break this all down for us. So I'm looking for a real engaging, informative time together. So I'm going to start out with you, Joe. Joe and I go way back so far. But I remember him when he was like a college student up there in Ohio, Columbus, Ohio area, doing an internship. Now look at the brother. He's running mental health clinics deep into space and throughout Columbus, Ohio, as it relates to engaging Black men, just doing all kind of wonderful things. Y'all got to hit this brother up on social media and connect with him. Let me start with you, my brother. As a therapist, primarily working with Black men, what are some of the issues you're seeing that are important to us to know as well as to address?
Thank you for the question. And first, let me thank A Call to Men for all that you do, specifically the senior leadership, Danielle, Tony, and Ted. Ted, I've never had the opportunity to meet you, so it's a pleasure. And obviously all your brilliant staff that's here. So we have this interactive community conversation. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I thought that I actually would anchor this question or respond to this question, Tony, in the following way. And I just want to read to you from Huey Newton's book called Revolutionary Suicide. For 22 months in California men's colony at St. Louis Obispo, after my first trial for the death of Patrolman John Frey, I was almost continually in solitary confinement. There in a 4x6 cell, except for books and papers relating to my case, I was allowed no reading. Despite the rigid enforcement of this rule, inmates sometimes slipped me magazines under my door when the guards were not looking. One that reached me was the May 1970 issue of Ebony magazine. It contained an article written by Lacey Banco summarizing the work of Dr. Herbert Hendon, who had done a comparative study on suicide among Black people in the major American cities. Dr. Hendon had found that suicide rates among Black men between the ages of 19 and 35 had doubled in the past 10 years to 15 years, surpassing the rates for whites in the same age range. The article had and still has a profound effect on me. I have thought long and hard about its implication. I should just go back and just say that was 1970, what he was referencing. The Ebony article brought to my mind Durkheim's classic study, Suicide, a book I had read earlier while studying sociology at Oakland City College. To Durkheim, all types of suicide are related to social conditions. He maintains that the primary cause of suicide is not individual temperament, but forces in the social environment. In other words, suicide is caused primarily by external factors, not internal ones. As I thought about the conditions of Black people and about Dr. Herndon's study, I began to develop Durkheim's thesis into a way of explaining the Black experience in the United States. This eventually led to the concept of revolutionary suicide. So I just start off with that simply because, as Tony mentioned, I am deeply enmeshed in the space for mental health and behavioral health. But by far, the last thing that I'm interested in doing is pathologizing our people, partly because of the situations that we're in. And so I often say that some of the best antidepressants that you can give people are social justice. And one of the best anti-anxiolytics is a good job. And so for me, I like to anchor the conversation around what's happening with Black men and Black people in general around the social conditions in which we find ourselves in. And so the last thing that I'll say, and I'm just super, super excited about this conversation, while I'm very much interested in this concept of how culture can impact culture, what I see happening in private practice oftentimes has more to do with the lack of emotional and psychological capital that men have. I mean, basic things when it comes to emotional, interpersonal skills to be able to connect with people, to be intimate with people, psychological skills to be able to understand the differences between jealousy and rage, or rage and frustration, all those things that put them at risk for isolation, resentment, and a whole bunch of other things that can be the sort of progenitors to mental health problems, and certainly this issue of suicide. So with that being said, I'm excited for the conversation, and I look forward to having some more to say later on.
Yeah, that's well. But Corey, you was nodding your head as you was listening to Jewel. What was resonating for you?
The piece about cultural competency. There is an issue where culture is resonated through all of us as Black and brown men, and also just men in general. There is this communication barrier that we often have, or disconnect that we have with our own emotions in many of various spaces. And one in particular, we all have a manager that we all probably aren't the most keen or the most fond of, and being able to actually communicate, hey, these are my boundaries. These are the issues that I'm having in this workspace or even at home. However, a lot of times men take those particular issues and say, hey, I'm just going to go work out. Oh, or I'm just going to run, or I'm just going to do something outside of being able to communicate your own issues, or at least your own emotions being conveyed to another man. And then also cultural competency. There's less than 1% of Black and brown therapists in the industry. And there is an issue with that because there's not enough individuals seeing a future in that industry. But also, there are Black and brown people that want to sit across from someone that has a cultural competent understanding of their background, and also being able to convey subtle nuanceness in culture.
Yeah, let me stay right here with you, Corey. You're already tapping into the question I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you to go just a little deeper. Can you share some specific methods or practices that Black Space, your organization, employs to support mental health in Black and brown communities, particularly focusing on men?
Oh, most certainly. So we make sure that we service the Black and brown men, women, and LGBTQI groups all separately, because those are all individuals that have separate issues that are going on within their own communities. So when it comes to men, we make sure that when we're servicing Black and brown men, we're giving them somewhat of a healthcare, or at least mental health package. We're supporting the Black and brown owned businesses by men by being able to purchase those small supplies, or being able to give them mental health coping mechanisms, and being able to service it to those individuals. And those individuals and those Black and brown men are able to sit down and be able to sit across from a licensed therapist, which far too many have not been able to have the ability to be able to do so because of either finances, or either health equity, or many other reasons. And then we also are going to the neighborhoods that need it the most. We're trying to dismantle any stigma, whether it is travel, or either that they're not able to see a Black clinician, or many other issues, by being able to go to where the need is, but also asking them for immediate feedback in every single one of our groups. We are providing meals in every single one of our groups from Black and brown owned caterers. And then also we're able to give them directories of other Black and brown clinicians if they so feel the need to be able to have one-on-one sessions. But a lot of those individuals far often are rotating individuals that keep on going to our group sessions, and likes that community of being able to sit across from someone 40 or 30 years their senior, and being able to hopefully tap into their advice.
I love it, brother. Meeting people where they're at. I'm hearing that geographically and in every other way as well. So that means so much to me, specifically in the work that we've done over the years at A Call to Men. Nicole, as you're listening to Corey, all right, it makes me think of you and your work. What's coming up for you?
As I was listening to Corey, I was thinking about the work that I do with boundary setting and how crucial that is for Black men and Black women and everyone to have the language to express what you need, to be able to communicate if something is making you feel uncomfortable, if something is not sitting right with you, if there's something more that you need from a particular relationship, or something that you need less of in a relationship. And when I have done this work with men, and I feel honored that I'm able to come into a space as a Black woman and to be able to create a safe space for Black men to talk about these issues and to create a place where they can hear this information and see how it applies to their own life, and to give them permission basically to have that language and think to themselves, wait a second, as Corey said, like if you have a problem with a boss, if you have a problem with a partner, if you have a problem with a family member, to be able to acknowledge that and say, okay, I don't have to sit with this discomfort. I don't have to be in this space, that there are steps that I can take, and it's okay for me to say no. It's okay for me to tell this person, I don't want to talk to you. I need our relationship to shift in this way, to be able to articulate their needs in a way that they're more likely to have those needs met, or to establish in that relationship, okay, this person isn't going to give me what I need. There's no compromise here. Now I can decide whether or not I want to move away from that relationship or seek further help. So I feel like that's a really important part of the whole piece, is the boundaries and the communication.
Yeah, Tanya, you want to jump in here?
No, I second that sentiment. I was thinking about the same thing, and Corey said it also when it talks about creating safe spaces. That's one of the things that we do at Interactive Advocacy, is that we focus on dialogue that creates safe spaces where individuals, brown and Black people, are able to express themselves, freely and creatively, and just, be aware that the conversations around mental health is okay to have, because unfortunately, many of our cultures, this is not something that we participated in. I was just actually having a conversation with someone about this yesterday, when one of the concerns that they had is seeking mental health, but then making sure that the person was able to resonate with them, not just as a person of color, but a person of color that was also Hispanic. And for them, culture played a huge role in how they were going to be able to connect and really understand that individuals, because there are some cultural nuances that prevents them from even just feeling like it's okay to share. So this resonated with me on so many levels as a person of color that also has Caribbean and Latin background.
Yeah. I want to stay with you, Nicole. I'm sorry, Tanya, I want to stay with you for a second. Tell us about some of the work you've done with men in the military, and how does that work intersect with the promotion of healthy manhood?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great question. For the most part, the work that we do in the military is rooted in understanding and addressing some of the unique challenges they face in promoting healthy manhood, right? The work that we do in violence prevention ultimately our goal is to dismantle the rates in which violence occurs. And we recognize the fact that men, it's so difficult for them to come forward to share when it comes to violence that they personally experience. So what we do is we develop tailored programs that focus specifically on everything from resilience to communication and dismantling harmful stereotypes within the military culture. Within that culture, it's like a subculture already, and men are perceived as being tough and strong because you're in the military, right? You are the war fighter. So by fostering a culture of emotional expression that focuses on empathy, for us, we aim to redefine what masculinity looks like in the military. We create environments that support mental well-being as well as positive values. And for us, that's one of the things that is a huge focus for us, and one of the areas that we champion for the loudest. As a matter of fact, you can see it in our logo. The green in our logo represents our awareness and our desire to focus on mental health.
Yeah. And I know I really, really appreciate that. We spend a lot of time at A Call to Men on military installations ourselves, and there's also using the influence that these men have, not only helping them in being their authentic selves, but also knowing that these are men of influence. When they speak, other people listen. I mean, you could be a 19-year-old young man fresh out of boot camp, and you're sitting on the plane next to a 65-year-old dude, and he's like drumming you with questions, right? He wants to know what you're thinking. You ain't thinking nothing. You really, you ain't even got a lot to offer. You're 19 years old. But the fact that you got that uniform on,
Changes
people want to know. It changes things. People want to know from you and hear from you. And so it's that influence that we really gravitate to with men, and help them to use that influence to create a platform meaning what you choose to elevate, to really speak about the importance of healthy, respectful manhood. Now, Nicole, I know you share in that work. You and Tanya actually partner in many efforts within the military. So what's your spin on what the sisters sharing as well as your own experience?
I am so grateful to what Tanya is doing in this field and for the military. So thank you so much for your work. I love working with military communities because my father is a retired Marine. So I grew up as a dependent, surrounded by the military culture, and I consider it a great honor to be able to serve service members in this way. And so I spent 5 years working with the Department of Navy Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Office, doing trainings that focused on bystander intervention and domestic violence prevention. And I think one of the first things that was important to do is to get buy-in. And I want to jump on what Tanya had mentioned earlier about creating the empathy. It's hard to care about a problem if you don't see how it affects your life, or you don't see how solutions to that problem can positively impact you and other people that you interact with. So I loved being able to connect the dots and show men how that this is a positive expression of masculinity, that being able to not only speak up for others, but also to speak up for yourself. And that's what the work that I'm doing now with the boundary setting and the violence prevention, in addition to trying to dismantle stereotypes, all the things you talk about in the man box about men have to be strong, men have to be, X, Y, and Z. And some of those have positive attributes, but too much of something can be negative as well. And that comes with a lot of the work that I do is personal safety and self-defense slants on information. And there's that stereotype that, oh, well, men don't need self-defense. Self-defense means physical, and men are already strong and they don't need to learn these skills. And so by breaking that down and explaining that self-defense is more than physical, self-defense is boundary setting, it is communication skills, it is intuition and awareness, it is all of these different things that we are using in other aspects of our life, then it becomes personal. Then it becomes something that people can see and interpret in other ways, and it becomes more accessible. And that's how we can start to dismantle these harmful gender stereotypes and fundamentally shift the conversation.
Yeah. Now, what's resonating for me right now, I'm going back to what Corey and Jewel was sharing. They didn't use the term self-defense, but I heard it. I heard it in how they were speaking about Black and brown men and mental health. So I want to come to you, brothers. What that term self-defense, how does that, and you seem to be all over it, Corey, so let me just stop talking and ask you, that term self-defense, what's resonating for you?
To give like a high level overview and why these two women are doing some amazing work, and it really resonated with me being in the military for 9 years. The only reason why I went into the military was because my mom passed away when I was a junior going to high school, which left me be homeless. And so my first year being by myself essentially was me avoiding group homes and boys' homes, because I also did not know what it means to lose somebody that took care of me. I didn't cry for the very first year that my mom passed away, but I did cry after my first month in boot camp, and where the only picture I had of her was an obituary that I accidentally washed and dried away, and it brittled away. The military is a place where there is this macho machismo that's going to be brought across from every point of view all the time. And unfortunately, my malleable mind at the time thought that that was what men were created to do. I had to just be very still and very sterile and not really have more than just two emotions. And I quickly understood that was not the case. I understood that watching a movie from Antoine Fisher, that would not allow me to be able to have a very fruitful family once I began to start to have one. So I noticed in 2020, I needed to seek therapy in order to be able to be a Swiss Army of sorts, to be able to understand my own emotions and be able to take care of other people's emotions in that way as well too. And so I sit here very happy that I have a 1-year-old daughter and a partner that I absolutely love, and being able to create this family and being able to understand what my vulnerabilities are, and also my emotions, and being able to articulate those spaces. So once again, thank you, ladies, for definitely all the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you,
Can I
brother.
jump in, Tony, if you don't
Mhm.
mind? Because
Please.
all of this is resonating with me in so many different ways. And it really made me think about, as Nicole was sharing about the self-defense. But as I think about culture and cultural relevance, I have a young son that is into the world of arts, right? He's into music and fashion design and all of that. And I think that it's also important to share, especially because this is a part of what we do at Interactive Advocacy, is the importance of telling culturally relevant stories, right? So we do parallel storytelling, but being able to engage when it comes to creative arts, and in allowing arts to be at the focus of conversation when it comes to mental health. You see it in music, you see it in paintings, you see it in dance. People are able to communicate in a completely different way. Words that they're not able to actually articulate, they're able to give you that visual interpretation. And that's why I think that it's also important that as we're having this conversation, that we mention the importance of arts as we are addressing individuals that are also dealing with mental health, especially when it comes to communities of Black and Brown men.
So with your permission, I'll actually will sort of chime in on that, because I guess I was trying to figure out a way to sort of link the specific clinical things to what was being said, because that's just the sort of area. So I would say, for example, when it comes to this whole issue about culture and mental health, one of the things that we found very successful is hip hop therapy, precisely because of what Sister Tanya said. Because for young men, especially the types of young males that I work with, certainly in the inner city, this whole idea of when you get there is not a small thing. Everybody probably has seen the whole Good Will Hunting movie. Hopefully every good clinician, it's not a question of if, just a question of when they'll actually have that therapeutic breakthrough. But for so many brothers, as we were just saying, it just takes so much to get there. And what we know is that, obviously, as Sister Tanya just said, our folks are not reading books, they're not reading peer-reviewed articles, they're not even watching movies, but they are listening to music. And so the question becomes, for me, how can you use culture? Because if a brother is listening to, something about drugs, then we can talk about addiction. If they're listening to something about, police violence, we can talk about trauma. If they're talking about baby mama drama, then we can talk about anxiety and depression. So at its core, the whole question becomes, for me, when you're talking about men, masculine, and mental health, is what are the sort of educational and informational technologies that we have? And I'll just go back to this idea of cultural competency. Most folks really don't know about men. And I'm going to say that precisely because I actually teach. I teach at the University of Michigan. I teach at University of Toledo. And social workers, and it's not their fault, there's nothing about men in the curriculum. And so if you're talking about basic measures of cultural competency, we use the ASK model, right? Attitude, skills, and knowledge. Professionals don't have that. And I've spent my entire life trying to crack that nut. And certainly what the folks at A Call to Men are doing is that there has not been any sort of basis for the types of knowledge-based professional skills, let alone clinical interventions that help us be successful with these populations. So when we're talking about cultural competency, I would also just add clinical competency, because most folks can't just deal with trauma. Most folks can't deal with grief. Most folks can't deal with a lot of things that our people are suffering from. And so it is important that I think that while we talk about some of these things, it's really important to just say, if we're talking about mental health, and mental health is not the same thing as mental illness. There's an important distinction to make. So that's the sort of area in which I'm super, super excited for us going. I think it's been said thus far that we need to have more folks in this space. But the reality is we do need to have folks that are not just culturally competent, but also clinically competent to do this work.
Wonderful, wonderful, great information, man. Y'all are all over this issue around culture, and I really appreciate it. And this is what I want to ask next, because in our work at A Call to Men, It's the leadership from Black and brown women that have moved us into these spaces, man, that have given the work, I'm gonna call it the work, permission to go into these spaces, right? So I want to ask Nicole and Tanya, what insight do you believe that Black women collectively bring when addressing men's mental health? What's the insight that y'all bring that opens this scope up, that brothers like Jewel is all over it, Corey is all over it? But I'm locked into that you sisters collectively representing Black women really are the foundation for us going into many of these spaces, man. What's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. Tony, that's such a great question. First, I've got to go to the fact that I'm a mother of sons, right? I'm a mother of men. And so for me, I want to speak for self first and say that we have an absolute crucial role when it comes to shaping the discourse around men's mental health, right? As a mother of sons, I've recognized that our insights are invaluable when it comes to fostering understanding, again, empathy, and dismantling stereotypes. I see it. My sons and I have conversations so often, and no matter how hard I try, I will never be able to understand their fears and their concerns as a Black man. I understand it as a woman, as a mother, but never the way they feel it. And so I think that me first as a mother, but then as a woman of color, we bring a holistic perspective, right? Addressing those interconnectedness between mental health and, once again, culture, social and systemic factors. All of these things play a role. And our ability to come together as women, amplifying our voices as well as our experiences as women of color, I think that we have an opportunity to enrich the conversation when it comes to mental health. And then by that, we are able to contribute more to some of these nuanced and then taking these nuances and then take a more inclusive approach when it comes to some of these dialogues around mental health.
Thank you for that.
Completely agree. Oh, pardon me, Toby.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Tanya, I 100% agree with you on that. I am not a mother, but I have a father, I have brothers, I've been in relationships. So I have been on the receiving end of how men interpret masculinity, because it is a direct reflection of how they treat me and how they interact with me. So as a Black woman, I can speak to the fact that I've had wonderful interactions and I've had awful interactions. And so by allowing the space for men and women to come together and to share experiences and to not have those experiences minimized or diminished or disbelieved, and instead have the space to listen and have that empathy. We keep coming back to that word, and I feel like that's so crucial to this conversation, because it's not a problem that can be solved by just one person or by one gender. It's all of us. We all have to work together and be supportive of each other and be aware of the issues and come together to create solutions that work for everyone. And it's really hard conversations, but I feel like Black women can have such a crucial aspect of this by sharing our experiences, sharing our voices, sharing how we see the men in our lives acting and how they are treating us, and giving that perspective. Because, it's like, I'm going to bring this to, like physiology. I don't know if anyone has ever had an injury and you've been to physical therapy and you're working on something and the physical therapist says, oh, you're leaning to the left. And you say, but I feel like I'm standing straight. And then when you adjust and lean more to the center, now it feels like you're leaning all the way to the right. But it was just because you had to balance. So sometimes balance might feel like it's off center when you first start, but we have to be willing to have that discomfort so that we can move towards solutions.
Yeah.
Can I answer that in a very specific way in terms of, and I appreciate that. So Tony, as mentioned early on, he knows me from way back when, and it's clear to me that, when it comes to my professional career, that the only way in which I really even got to get where I was through the sponsorship of beautiful, brilliant women of color. The way in which that works in clinical practice has to do with specific issues related, like I started off, when it comes to risk stratification and suicide. Meaning that the first thing that I have to pay attention to as a clinician is not just, why guys come in, it's actually why now. In other words, most guys, because obviously they've had no history, what we said, of talking about problems, by the time that they end up coming to outpatient treatment, they typically are doing far worse than what they actually think they are. So they might have convinced themselves. And the truth is, the reason why they're there is because they got to the point where they're about to lose their job, their spouse or partner is about to lose them. And most importantly, the reality is that the women in their lives care for them more than they care for themselves, and they say, you need to get some help. So in many ways, women have always loved us more than we loved ourselves, and end up being at the front line of simply making sure that men get help. And we see this, of course, when it comes to medical help, because we know the average brother ain't going to go to see no doctor, and it's their wives that tell them to go see a doctor and all that sort of stuff. But that's extremely crucial. The second area, and I'll just point out two more real quickly, is we actually focus on this concept called masculinist therapy, which is essentially the idea that men are seen as subjects, not objects in therapy. But what that also means is the vast majority of brothers, or a good portion of them that come in, they think that they go come in and actually sort of complain about women. And obviously they get disabused of that. But it just goes back to this basic point that so often one of the major risk factors for mental health is how men see masculinity, how they see women and the issues that they blame and assign to their lives. And so if they think that their wives shouldn't be talking, shouldn't be all that sort of stuff, then it's the basis for anxiety. So what's actually happening in men's lives cannot be divorced from what's happening in the lives of the women and girls in their lives, and certainly in our community. And the last thing is collateral, because I love what you just said, Nicole. There's this reality of creating safe space for men and boys, and that happens a lot. But there also has to be checked, not just in a domestic violence sense, but in a mental health sense. So I have to always bring in what we call collateral, people in men's lives, particularly women in men's lives, to say, is what I'm seeing really true? Is this change that's happening, all the stuff that he's saying? Because again, a good portion of folks, even in private therapy, even if you're a good therapist, people lie. It's like trying to testify on the altar, right? We always self-select. And so this has never been just, even though I'm unapologetically committed to men and boys, the issues related to community mental health is nothing ever separated from the lives of women and girls. And that's precisely how mental health and community mental health should be.
Yeah. We are at a place in the work where we're understanding community trauma, and we're understanding community healing, right? And it's very much a Black and brown experience. Well, I'm not going to solely say it's a Black and brown experience, but I am going to say we're at the forefront of addressing it. And Black women are providing tremendous leadership in those spaces. Corey, what's resonating for you?
Once again, just being able to know that there's spaces that are geared for Black men, women, and LGBTQI individuals. Black Space has been very intentional with doing such, and so through the last 3 years, we've implemented art therapy, where we're able to create cooking classes where are practical tools for individuals to be able to learn to be able to fulfill themselves, but in a healthy way. Being able to choose certain ingredients that has low sodium, or also have a low amount of sugar, and replacing that granular sugar with other healthy solutions. But also, we also understand from a very fundamental standpoint that cooking is a cultural gathering. A lot of cultures circle around being able to either eat together or either being able to prepare a meal together. And we want to be able to function in that type of space. So we also have yoga, where there's meditation classes, and being able to also allow Black and brown men and women and LGBTQIA individuals to know that they should take care of their physical body as much as they are taking care of their mental wellness. There's one thing we hinge on when it comes to mental health and mental wellness. We make sure for Black Space, we veer away from mental illness. That word has a very daunting, it just has a very dark cloud over it. A lot of Black and brown people don't want to go into a space saying that they identify as an individual that has mental illness or any illness of any sort. So we make sure that when we're in our group sessions with Dr. Knox, she's labeling everything as mental wellness. We're going to be well after we are having our group sessions. We're going to be well after being able to learn how to cook and being able to provide these other tools for not only ourselves, but for the individuals that are surrounding us.
Yeah. Love that. Love that. Just the whole, and you're speaking, that last part you were speaking about is just the notion of labels, and what does that mean for we as Black people, and the impact labels have had in our lives. So figuring out a way to flip that is essential. And I appreciate that you're doing that. So this is what I want to do right now. I want to ask everybody, each of you, the four of you, to take a minute or so, share something that you feel is just very important. We're not leaving yet, because I'm also going to grab a couple of questions from the folks that are here present with us. But before I do that, I want to just make sure I give ample time for each of you to grab a minute or so and share something that you feel is very important for the people to know as we're having this conversation around the particular work you do, impacting culture with culture, right? And how you do it and what's important to you in the delivery of that, whatever that is. Take a minute or so and share that with the folks here. Jewel, you smiling. I don't know why the hell you smiling, but since you smiling, you could start.
Because you're brilliant, and I always love the way in which you put things together. It always, it moves me, and it has for the majority of my adult life.
So
And
now,
that's what I
so now
appreciate.
you're making me feel bad because I just
Listen, man.
look.
Listen. So for the folks that's on this call, and I'm actually working on a piece, and I do this thing, and so Tony is a person who I lament on quite often. But what I will say, with your permission, Corey, is to kind of go back and it's not necessarily a difference. I can just share within the context of how we see the work, because I think that labels are important and language is important. And when you make this distinction, the folks that you work with, between mental wellness and mental illness, I think you're 100% right. At the same time, I think there's some profound issues or problems that we have with not making the distinction between it, especially if we're talking about something like suicide. And here's the thing that I mean. So part of the reason why, because of the label and the stigma associated with that, so anybody who's lost a family member to suicide always ask the question, what could I have done? Why didn't I see, right? So one of the tragedies of suicide is not just the impact that individual loss, it's the communal impact of what that means for other folks who do that. Reality is we don't have those same sort of questions when it comes to like cancer. We don't say, well, why did I, what could I have done if to stop the cancer and stuff like that. And that's because, for example, in some respects, we just don't see mental illness as something that folks are not necessarily responsible for. And the reality is, I'll give an example of my daughter. My daughter has Crohn's. And because she has Crohn's, it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when she's going to have a flare up. And so if you're suffering from true trauma, it's not a question of if, your 5 domains will be impacted: safety, intimacy, sense of control, all those things. It's just a question of degree. And so one of the things that Black folks have never had within the context of mental health is never having the permission to say that we're not right, that we just can't fix our face and get ourselves together. And so while I understand this whole issue of not trying to label things, the reality is that we got to say, if you are suffering from depression, that's a beast. If you have real PTSD or panic attacks or OCD, those are things that, not just wellness things can actually fix, but trained clinical intervention, right? So, and in reality is we don't know about wellness until we know about illness. And I can just share with you as a person, we brush your teeth, but you don't know until you find out you got gum disease, that there's really a problem, right? And so the last thing I'll say related to that is part of the reason why we have these things is because we only think about mental illness or mental wellness as an intervention and not prevention. And here's the way in which I sort of give this with your permission. So if I asked everybody on this call, how often do you go fix your car, or go get your oil change? You might say every, 2 to 3 months. If I ask you how often you go, get your teeth cleaned, you might say every 6 months, whatever. But if I ask you how often you go see your therapist, the likely answer is when there's a problem, right? And nobody goes to take their car in when the engine is on fire. Nobody goes to the dentist, hopefully, when they have a teeth abscess. But we think about mental illness or mental health only when it's actually something that has to be intervened. And I'm here to say, if you got some baby mama drama, it would benefit you to see somebody. If you done lost somebody to grandparent during COVID, if you done lost a job, if we're first hired, first fired, if this thing called race really matters, it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when some of these things will take a foothold in your soul. And to actually not think of that is to almost think of our people as being sociopaths and not feeling. So we got to create space for the reality that mental and behavioral health is something that we all at some point might need to have somebody, some help with, as young folks say, because we be feeling some type of way. My apologies. I think that's a little bit more in a minute.
Oh no! I see that Tony probably has gotten to some technical issues. Let me clarify a little bit more about when it comes to mental wellness. Oftentimes, we're seen as Black and brown individuals that we're the least likely to be able to see a clinician. And in order for that to be able to be a rate that we want to dismantle or at least abolish, we want to be able to essentially hide the proverbial pill inside of the applesauce. So what we're doing is pretty much making sure that there is not such of a daunting label of illness being labeled, to be able to get people into being able to have therapy by first just to let them know that when you're coming into the space, you're going to be able to feel well. You're going to feel better than you were when you first came into this population. What we're also are able to do is provide them more education on what does it look like for you to be able to continue on this track of being able to have the journey for mental wellness versus being able to have this label of mental illness, because you're not going to be able to feel better by just labeling yourself as having or being mentally ill or just being ill in general. For my own quest, I've been able to definitely go down that track because first I was able to see a Black therapist. That Black woman felt a void for me as a young Black person to be able to talk to someone that kind of resembles a little bit of this void that I had for my mom. My very first clinician I had was a white man that lived in the suburbs of Milwaukee that suggested to me after my mom passed away and didn't cry that I should drop out of high school and get a job at a local grocery store. And so my skepticism of mental wellness, or at least mental health, was very high. Not until I sat across from someone that, one, knew about my background without me having to tell too much of a nuanced story about it. Two, this person also grew up in the same exact neighborhood that I grew up in. And they were able to immediately connect with me on that point. From there, I always divert over to Antoine Fisher is a perfect movie of being able to break down that barrier, and that person being able to go into that conquest. It's going to take some time, especially when it comes to Black and brown people. And so when it comes to being able to be in this space and not being in the world of academia and entering in that space, I can never say not enough that mental wellness is a buzzword that's going to definitely allow individuals to understand what does mental health mean for them. And so, yeah, I just want to take a pause right there. I don't want to go over a minute for you, Mr. Porter.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that.
Can I chime in on this also?
Please,
Because I
please.
think this is such a healthy dialogue, and I think as women that we also have a responsibility to channel and challenge some of the harmful behaviors associated with stereotypes and promote positive values. When I was having a conversation with one of my other sons yesterday, and we talk all the time, one of the things that he was talking about is the perceptions that women have, especially in that 18 to 26-year-old age group, and the perceptions that they have when it comes to masculinity. And that he was sharing with me that, women, if they see their boyfriend or their man crying, they look at him as weak. If they see him in pain or struggling, they look at him as, the person that I'm not going to want to be with. And I think that women have a responsibility to challenge these harmful stereotypes. We have also a responsibility to reshape the perceptions of masculinity. And it's like Nicole was saying earlier, to give men the permission to be okay, to feel comfortable if they're feeling sad or if they're upset or if they're in pain. And we have a huge role in this. And if we don't allow men to feel comfortable and safe in that space, then it's very hard for them to even want to share with us if you're not the mother or the auntie or this person. So we have to do a greater part when it comes to dismantling some of these toxic behaviors and say that it is okay for you to not be okay.
Mm-hmm. All right, yeah. Nicole, go ahead, get the last words on this piece.
Everyone has said such important things, and I just want to add on to what everyone has said and just emphasize that in the work that I do, I consider self-care a form of self-defense. Seeking out mental health services when something could cause harm, whether it's something that's causing physical harm or something that's causing emotional harm, and seeking out ways in which to prevent that from happening is a form of self-defense, and that comes down to personal empowerment. When we feel empowered to seek out help, when men feel empowered to seek out help or talk to their friends or talk to their partners or express their feelings or set boundaries and say no to things they don't want or say yes to the things that they do want, and not feel like they are going to be ridiculed or pushed back into that man box, that creates those feelings of personal empowerment that then ripples through other aspects of our life. And one thing that I wanted to touch on that Corey had said, you were talking about the cooking class, and you mentioned something else that you do with the Black space. The outdoors is so incredibly healing. And there have been so many studies that show that access to green spaces, sitting next to running water, just getting outside and getting fresh air. You don't even have to go climb a mountain. You can go to a park, but simply being outside has incredible mental health benefits. And a lot of times, Black men, Black women, our Black community don't necessarily have access to those spaces. They feel like it's not for them because of, years of racism and systemic oppression that kept us out of those places. And so some of the work that I do is getting people into the outdoors. I'm a huge outdoor adventurer, and I do a lot of things solo. And I work with other Black groups like Black Girls Trek-In and Black Men Who Hike LA that has this focus on trying to get more Black people into the outdoors to really harness those benefits, and that ripple effects into mental health. And it challenges stereotypes. And when we have that community and that safe space to reach out to and say, hey, well, I've never thought about going out there. I feel like it's not for me, but wait, I see this group that's doing it. I see other people who look like me that are doing it, and they seek those groups out. And now they have community. Now they have safe space. Now they have, the outdoors or whatever hobby or activity that is helping to give them those feelings of safety and community and connection to nature and all of those healing things. I feel like that is another way in which we can support our Black men.
All right, cool. I really, really appreciate this. So look, I got you off for about 5 more minutes, and then I got to pass it to Kimia. So I got one last question that I'm gonna pose to everybody. I got a whole bunch of questions here. Some beautiful stuff comes from the chat, but I think I got one way to put it out there that everybody can answer to. Oh, but before I do that, I was scrolling through here, man, because we got like 6 pages of folks here, 6 screens. A sister girlfriend, Shauna Aaron's Cook. She's on here with us. That sister gave Ted and I our first grant to do some work in this space over 20 years ago. Nobody was touching us, man. Y'all know the deal. We're talking about 20 years ago. That sister said, the heck with that. She gave us $50,000 to host an event 20 plus years ago. Sean, I just want to send you some love. All right, now, this is the last question I want to pose to all of you, all right? And I need you to take about 30, 40 seconds or so in answering it, all right? When it comes to men and men's healing, right? What moves you? What motivates you in regards to the idea of hope and healing for men? And I want to also emphasize, even those who have caused harm, right? What motivates you, right? What keeps you at the table, all right? Anybody can start. 30, 40 seconds.
I'll start. I say what motivates me is hope that things can change, and that despite everything that we see and everything we may have experienced, that change is possible. And although there may be problems in the world, to wake up every morning knowing that I am part of the solution continues to push me forward. Getting messages from people that say how much this work has impacted them motivates me to keep going. Seeing, looking back to my past and seeing what my father went through, what my brother went through, friends of mine who have sons like Tanya and what they're going through, and the stress in their mind of how do I raise a Black man in this world, it just motivates me to keep going because I want a better world for them, and I will do everything that I can to try to make that happen.
All right. Thank you. 30 seconds, folks, because we're short on time. But go ahead, Tanya.
I think for me, I recognize that there is transformative power in collective action. Transformative power in collective action and that we can make a difference together. This is not just a man issue, a woman issue. This is a people issue. This is a human issue. And together we can make lasting impact. And it's about us doing it just that way, you know, engaging in open conversations, challenging stereotypes, and recognizing that we can absolutely create a culture of nonviolent people, you know, so we all have a role to play in when it comes to reshaping the perceptions of masculinity, and that's that's how I feel and why I stay engaged.
Thank you, my sister. Corey.
I am motivated every single day to make sure that this work is given to Black and Brown people completely for free, that we are going to where they are, where the need is, and also to understand that each individual that's going back into the community is going to make an impact. They're going to be able to talk to their friends and families much differently. They're going to be able to also advocate for being able to have that mental wellness or mental health counselor, or at least practitioner, in their lives of not only themselves, but everyone around them that they can identify that needs it.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you, young man. Appreciate you. Jewel?
Yes, for me, it's at the end of the day, it's a basic question of justice. And I say clinical justice. You know, people know about social justice, economic justice. Clinical justice for me, and particularly for Black men and Black boys, is the idea that Black men and boys can be properly diagnosed, properly dispositioned, and properly treated. Because at the end of the day, none of us are born with all these sort of problems. And the point that I think Sister Tanya made is that for me, it's not even a question of if, it's just a question of when. And we're just not giving our folks, our young boys, our young men, any opportunity to be different. So it doesn't surprise me that we have these sort of issues. I think the miracle when it comes to some of these rates that we're seeing over the last several years is why have we been so resilient and so stable up to this point? So I actually apologize to men. I apologize specifically to young folks because we've kind of abandoned the responsibility to pay attention to their internal, emotional, and psychological lives. And I think that's, at the end of the day, I know that if we do this, then we can actually help change some of the course of the things that we're facing these days.
Man, I love you. I ain't got nothing but love for you, man. I love you all. I really, really appreciate all that's been shared here. I want to give a special shout out to the comms team, particularly Bailey Buckles, who put this time together. And I want to pass it to Kenya, our Chief Communication Officer, as we begin to bring this time to a close.
Yes. Hello, best friends. Thank you for joining us today. And thank you to our special guests for joining us and sharing so much important information. You have blessed us all with your passion and your vulnerability today. So I want to share a little bit with you about the importance of continuing this conversation. We want to see all of you in these spaces. So you can find us on all of our social channels: Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at A Call to Men. Morgan is going to be dropping those in the chat. You can find us on TikTok at A Call to Men Official, Tony on LinkedIn, Ted on Instagram, Nicole on IG at Adventures of Nick and at Girls Fight Back, Tanya Jones on IG at Interactive Advocacy, Corey Fells, IG at DCoreyF, and then at Blackspace HQ. And Jewel Woods is on LinkedIn as well. We're going to be dropping those into the chat. Also, this is super important. If you want to continue this conversation, because I mean, I'm not ready for it to end. I don't know about you. You need to join us in our Facebook group. We're going to have clips and conversations over there. So you need to run, not walk, and click that link to join us on our Facebook link. If you don't see that in the chat, it's facebook.com/A Call to Men. I know people in the younger generation are not over there. I know you're not, but go ahead and join today so that you can continue this conversation with us. So I'm going to kick it over to Danny to give us our closing words on our conversation today.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kenya. Tony, Jewel, Tanya, Nicole, Corey, Bailey, for all of your work behind the scenes. This was an incredible conversation, and I am just feeling one, super full, because it's always, again, delicious to be in community with you all, even though we're virtual and there's screens in the way. But one of the things that I have been holding on to throughout our conversation today is everything that you all leaned into, all of the work that you're doing in your own communities and through your own organizations. It's such incredible work. And I find myself at the end of our time together just yearning for the day where this work isn't incredible, because it's the norm and not the exception. And so I am just honored to have been here, to be a fly on the wall for all of your brilliance. I know this is one of those community conversations that I'm going to keep going back to and rewatching and sharing out far and wide. Because again, what would it look like? What would our world, what would our communities, what would our families look like if this work was the norm and not the exception? So again, thank you all for being here with us today. It is 2 o'clock right on the dot. What a full hour. We invite you to unmute and get messy with us. Say hello, say goodbye. Have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Pour some joy into your bones, and we look forward to being back with y'all together in the future. Thanks, everyone.
So long.
Thank you.
Sending love
Thank
from
you so
Harlem,
much.
USA.
Appreciate
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank
Thank you, everyone.
Ted and Tony.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for a
Nothing but
wonderful
love.
presentation.
Bye-bye. Thank
You
you.
all be safe.
Everybody, thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Hey,
Y'all are
guys.
amazing.
Amazing. Thank you for having us.